people would come up and say, I got a letter from you. And that made me think, well, I better be careful with these letters because they mean something to people. So at first I didn't, because most of the work I did, the decisions I made were in person or by phone or traveling somewhere to see somebody, not by mail.
I think during the time that I was governor, I probably didn't appreciate as much the importance of that correspondence to people who might be studying government in the future and so on. And we tried hard to keep a reasonable system, but actually just coming here today and seeing this really underlines for me what an important part of history this correspondence is from actors. And it was really interesting for me to look at some of the governors that had long since preceded me and see if they face some of the same kinds of correspondence and issues. But I have a new appreciation for how important it is.
It's interesting. Being governor is a little bit like what I would imagine it's like to be shot out of a cannon. You're moving really fast, it seems really exciting, but you literally can't take it all in, and you don't even have a great sense of the consequences of everything. I think it's only in hindsight that you do, and seeing correspondence here or things that remind you of the impact of decisions that get made, of interactions and relationships that happen. It's why preserving history just matters so much, because the other thing is, in hindsight, none of our vision is quite as good as we think it is. We don't remember things exactly like they were, and fortunately the State Library and Archives has the actual records to tell us what really did happen.
Well, I think the way Bill said that was right, that it reminds me, the letter, it's not so much important what the letter says, it reminds me of something important. For example, there's a letter from the president of the Smoky Mountain Conservation Association to Governor Austin Peay, who was a Democratic governor from Middle Tennessee who took the Tennessee legislature by train to East Tennessee twice to persuade them to appropriate $2 million to create the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, or Tennessee's share of it. So the fact that that letter is there is a reminder of a lot.
It underlines for me how many Tennesseans there are that really care about what's going on. I mean, they care about it enough to sit down and to write to the governor, and I'm sure to others. And particularly in the world we live in today, I think it's important to just reaffirm how many people really care about how government works and are willing to take a part in it.
Well, there's a good example of that in the letter that is over there from a woman to Governor Frank Clement in 1956. He was very courageous. He integrated and sent federal troops to desegregate the Clinton school system. I was a junior in high school in Maryville at that time. And that was very controversial. I mean, that was 2 or 3 years after Brown versus the Board of Education. It was a year before Eisenhower sent troops or mobilized the National Guard in Little Rock, Arkansas. But that letter is from the woman saying that she's proud of Governor Clement for doing what he did. And that's an important reminder of what he did.
Because of the impact, we're asking for a waiver for our TennCare program or an extension on something else, because you realize the impact it's going to have on so many folks. You want to make certain that you get it right, and you tell this person who's incredibly busy, hey, this is why this really matters to 6.5 million Tennesseans.
Yeah, I think that when I think about complex issues that involve a lot of correspondence, there's a lot of it that occurs at the level of somebody with some function in the administration is talking to somebody with some function in HHS or something in Washington. But there also usually is some kind of contact, formal contact between the governor and the secretary. And I'm just, that always seemed to me to be too important to leave to be drafted by someone else and be part of it. It's something you really ought to sit down and you're talking to another person who's got great responsibilities, and just kind of make sure it says what you want to say with the tone that you want to say it.
When there's a business you're trying to talk into moving to Tennessee, there's a great letter I saw in there from then Governor Bredesen to the CEO of Volkswagen, and it's right after a fairly memorable occasion when then Mayor Corker of Chattanooga, later Senator Corker, hosted folks in his home. Lamar came and played the Tennessee Waltz on the piano, as I remember, and they were.
I played Chattanooga Shoo Shoo.
Oh, that's even better. But it was
both of them.
It was a memorable occasion.
Whatever Bredesen wanted, I did.
It was a memorable occasion, but then Governor Bredesen followed it up with a letter saying, "Here's why Tennessee's the right place." So we kind of set the right environment with a social gathering, but followed up with a very specific letter of, "Here's why Volkswagen's right." And this many years later, not only have they built that plant, but they've doubled and almost tripled in size. And
what it reminds me of is that after the piano playing and talk and all of that, Governor Bredesen disappeared with the Volkswagen officials into a private room because he had the checkbook. He was the governor. There's a letter over there from me, which I obviously wrote in 2005 as a United States Senator to Governor Bredesen. And I was thanking him for responding to an earlier letter I'd written him about saying I didn't want to see wind turbines on the ridge tops in Tennessee. And second, that I thought it was a waste of money since the wind didn't blow here. I was on a tear at that time, and still am generally, about wind as compared to nuclear power. But it's an example of something that I cared about, and I wrote him about, and he was responsive to it.
History matters, and in the passion of the moment, perception sometimes is all that comes through. But you hope over time some of that fog clears and people understand what actually did happen, what did get said, and why was that decision made. And so it's important that we make certain we record that right, so that again, as the fog of current polarization or whatever the battle of the day is clears away, we actually have a record of, well, no, here's what the states said about that, and here's what happened.
It's the raw material for storytellers, is what it is. David McCullough was one of my favorite writers of American history, and he relied on the letters in the National Archives to write his book 1776. He found a trove of letters that the Wright brothers wrote in Ohio for his book about the airplane. Alex Haley went to the archives to write the story of Roots. So the letters that are here one day will be useful to the storytellers of Tennessee's past and its present and its future.
You know, when you're trying to understand something that happened in the past, you see it's through this gauzy veil. I mean, time has gone past and things get confused and fogged and forgotten and other things get substituted and so on. And I think there's a real power in just going back to the actual words somebody wrote sort of in the heat of the moment. And it's really interesting. You know, in Nashville, you can go and look at some of the things like the original drafts of songs from the Beatles and people like that, and just to see the actual event of somebody writing the words down and crossing a word out here and so on is very powerful. And you know, I think a place like the archives is something that helps to preserve that, you know, sense of wonder for future generations.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't that governor all that long ago, but I'm pretty confident if I sat in here with the files and the records for 2 hours, I would have a better memory of what happened not that long ago when I was governor. So if that's true of me and I was in the middle of it, it's got to be way more true of folks who are trying to study what actually did happen.
As I learned more about Tennessee history, I found the journey, fascinating. And there's a period in which, you were a player. I mean, from about 1960 until 1980 or 1990, and I find really interesting in Tennessee history, a transitional period, and the archives is rich with materials from that. I think it's going to be a valuable collection.
I went to Tennessee Boys State when I was in high school. Governor Bredesen said he went there every year he was governor to talk to the Boys State and the Girls State. And that inspired me to want to learn more about government, to understand how it works, to respect it, to realize that politics is important, but not the most important thing. It's the means to an end. That the reason you want to be governor, for example, is so you can accomplish something, not just so you can exercise your political skills. So that time helped me want to read and learn about men and women and learn what had helped them to be successful in public life. And so I read a lot about that. And about all I figured out that was common to them was that they were all different. And they were sort of unique and were true to their own uniqueness. And that was the lesson I learned from that.
Tennessee to me is all about opportunity. You know, my wife and I moved to Tennessee. I guess it's well known by people. I wasn't born here. We moved to Tennessee in the late 1970s, not knowing a person in the state, and with all of our possessions packed in a car to come down here for a job. And the openness with which we were received and the kinds of opportunities that were presented to us was unlike anything I'd ever experienced anywhere else. And that really, to me, has been the essence of Tennessee. That, you know, that sense of welcoming and valuing each person for what they, you know, what they can do and how they think about things. It's opportunity for me.
I like the music and the mountains and the people, and I like the fact that Tennessee is still pretty much a place where people keep their feet on the ground. I mean, Phil moved here and has had a remarkable career in Tennessee. I'm a seventh generation Tennessean, and my ancestors wandered in here right at the Revolutionary time. But when I got time to go to law school, I went away to New York University, which my father thought was probably a communist institution, but it was certainly a place where I could get away from where I grew up and take a look at, do I really want to go back there or do I want to go somewhere else? And I decided after trying New York City and Washington, D.C. and New Orleans and Los Angeles and other places that I really wanted to put my feet back on the ground here for the reasons I just said. So in different ways, we have, you know, come to admire this state, and when I had a chance to walk across the state and spend the night with people in their homes, it just solidified it for me.
I used to make recruiting trips to New York City, and I remember on one trip being pressed by people saying, well, you know, Tennessee is the southern state and has all these multi-generational families, and you know, if we move down there, we're not going to be welcome, and you know, how do you think we're going to be accepted in Tennessee? And I said, well, I grew up in New York State, and I'm governor of Tennessee, and at the time when a person who grew up in Tennessee is the governor of New York, I'll listen to you, but not before.
Pretty good answer, Phil.
In today's world, when it's so easy to compose an email and it's sort of inherently a little more casual and chatty than you know, even if it's an important piece of correspondence, I think it's easy to forget the power of a written letter. You write it down on paper and send it off to somebody. And I still try to do that a lot, and I get a lot of reactions back from people saying, you know, I really appreciate getting that as opposed to a quickly written email. And you know, I hope that one of the things that might inspire future governors coming over here to the archives is just to you know, come to just really appreciate the power of the written word in that way in a physical piece of paper.